Hello, and welcome to the KaiNexus Continuous Improvement Podcast. If you were with us in the last episode, you may have heard myself, Chris Burnham, interviewing with Mark Graban about my story about why I joined KaiNexus and what I do at the company. And at the end, I asked Mark Graban, wearing the podcaster's host hat. He recently wrote a blog post about being at KaiNexus for 10 years. So as he celebrates his 10-year anniversary, I thought it would be a good time to reflect on with Mark on why he joined KaiNexus and what his role at KaiNexus is. Now, Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And as we talked about last time, welcome to the KaiNexus team. You're now a KaiNexian, even though we've known you and you've known us for a while. And yeah, so it's good. I mean, I'll reflect, I'll think about the 10 years. Do you want me to tell the story of going back to how I first joined?
Absolutely.
All right. So we'll go back to, this would have been January 2011. It's hard to believe that's 10 years ago, but to make sure I don't say 2001. No, 10 years ago is 2011. I got an email from an ER doc who I had met at a conference, having worked in healthcare for a while at that point. And he said, there's this other ER doc I know. He's in Austin, Greg Jacobson. He's working on this software. I think you two should meet. And, at first, I mean, like a lot of people, I was a little skeptical about well, what do you mean continuous improvement software? How he's written a journal article about Kaizen and, well, he really does mean like Masaki MI style, everybody, everywhere, everyday improvement. So that was encouraging, because if it was Kaizen event software, I probably wouldn't have really reached out. No offense to Kaizen events, but I believe strongly you need all these different types of approaches to improvement. And Greg originally then, and KaiNexus was very focused on daily continuous improvement. The product has expanded to do and help manage all kinds of improvement, thanks to our customers and their input over time. But the initial concept, the minimum viable product, if you will, was around daily continuous improvement. So come February, my wife and I were coming down from the Dallas area to Austin to go to a Willie Nelson concert at Austin City Limits, which is one of the most Austin-y things you could do. And that the day after that concert, which I think was a Sunday night, my wife had to leave because of some work travel, and then I was going to be just driving home from Austin. So I talked to Greg. I'm like, okay, well, I'll stay over an extra day, and I'll come in and chat with you, and we'll meet up. And it was Valentine's Day, 2011. Which just helps, it was Valentine's Day. It helps make it easy to remember. And, what I thought was, at least initially, we'll meet up, and I don't know if I'll like the guy, and I don't know if I'll agree with the software approach. I think we ended up talking for 3 hours, because we had a lot of common shared perspectives, and he was opening my eyes around the use cases of, Greg started KaiNexus to solve a problem he was facing as an ER doc, and his teams were facing at Vanderbilt. So I knew he was coming at this from a really good perspective, and that started the ball rolling. And I started talking to Matt Palulis, who is the other co-founder, chief operating officer, and he's been in a chief technology officer role. I kind of met the two of them, and at this point, it was really just them and a contract developer, and trying to figure out how could I support the cause? How could I get involved? And so then by the time, it took a while to figure out details, and I was still working for the Lean Enterprise Institute half-time. And so that decision point coming in the June 2011 was to leave the Lean Enterprise Institute, to continue consulting and speaking and doing things I was doing on my own, but then to work, call it roughly half-time with KaiNexus. Startups, a lot of times, you're in an easier position to offer equity as opposed to cash. And so for the first couple of years, I was working for equity, and my role and what I've done, and we can maybe dig into this. I'll stop giving such a speech about it. But I don't know, any follow-up questions about sort of the how did I get to meet Greg, and why did I join on with the team?
I think just knowing both of you and my experiences with both of you, when you say we had a common shared interest, I see and appreciate that now. Mm-hmm. I'm a little concerned about a Valentine's Day date, especially both of you being very happily married. But that's the life of improvement work. Like we don't want you to be married to continuous improvement.
Yeah.
We don't want you to be married to continuous improvement. We just want you to be engaged. But I think it's interesting, but that same draw for me of my father went to Vanderbilt for undergrad and for medical school, and listening to him talk about his experiences with continuous improvement, not really calling it that, but solving problems as a doctor. It allowed a bond for Greg and I, like a common vernacular. And so I think if my dad were here, my dad would be able to share as well stories like this. But you also talked about Masaki MI. And for those of you that know Greg, he has that book on his bookshelf. Like literally he'll reach right there and like an original hardbound copy, which is very expensive these days if you try to buy one on Amazon. But that concept of not just continuous improvement, like Kaizen software, it was a different kind of problem he was trying to solve, and that brought you into that. Can you kind of expand on that, like what those conversations were like? Did he give you examples or, I guess, frustrating pain points that he felt like you could help him solve?
I think at that point, part of the challenge was trying to help get some exposure for KaiNexus in different ways. I had worked for a software company previously. This was going back to 2001, but there I was more like employee number 20. And there was already more structure in place at that previous company. But coming on to join KaiNexus, there were some challenges that I was able to help with in some ways. I mean, neither Greg or I really had much software sales experience. I had worked basically as a software sales engineer who did custom demos and worked with the salespeople. So, I mean, I had been around it, and I guess I'd absorbed a lot. But we were doing things like I was trying to help give exposure to the company through my podcast, through my blog. Joe Schwartz and I were working on our book, Healthcare Kaizen, at the time. And the timing worked out well to include some examples and to cite Greg's journal article that he wrote with other people at Vanderbilt, to give some exposure to that, to talk a little bit about the challenges with doing Kaizen in a very paper-based way. So I was able to help make some introductions, because even then, 2011, this has changed a lot over a decade. There was a lot of skepticism about technology. I was not the only one reacting that way, but I was open to at least talk about it. There were some who were like, no software in lean. Like it's kind of, an old school mindset, where look, there are honest challenges and use cases, especially, so originally our audience, our target was healthcare organizations, multi-site organizations. How does somebody at the hospital across town see your paper bulletin board? Like, I don't think it's controversial to say there's a role for electronic visibility and electronic collaboration and sharing and so trying to just help articulate the case for KaiNexus to people and try to help convince them, okay, no, you having some spreadsheets on a shared drive is not software. You trying to build something in SharePoint, that's not software, and that's going to be way more expensive than KaiNexus. So we were trying to get a foothold in the market, trying to get exposure, doing some sales, coming to market with the first paying customers, and then trying to figure out how to onboard customers and how to keep customers happy. And, Matt got more help on the development side. And, those first couple of years were really, just getting the plane off the ground, if you will, to the point where we could bring in other people who had more experience. So like Greg and I had a lot of, passion for this, but you get to a point where you want to bring in someone like a Jeff Roussel to be a VP of sales. You want to bring in Adam Hamed as a principal architect. We had enough revenue now where we could start expanding the team. I cringe when people say fake it till you make it, because faking it sounds like that sounds dishonest, but like having to learn through experience and try to figure out software sales and product development processes that Greg and Matt were collaborating on. I think it was a really exciting time to try to just really help get the ball rolling from, I think, a really solid foundation in terms of having a problem to solve, Matt and Greg being a great co-founder pairing. Those are some thoughts, I guess, on the first couple of years.
No, it's interesting because, I think fake it till you make it. Probably a better explanation of that would be those early PDSA cycles where we're learning as we're growing. And I think that spirit of PDSA still exists today, 10 years later. It's a much more mature and I guess standardized culture, but I think one of the strengths that you brought to the organization was that credibility from you have good lean, like you're good to lean values, like you trust the lean process, and I think I've known you since your days at LEI, so it's easy for me to say that, but for people that maybe aren't familiar, that it was okay. They're seriously invested in continuous improvement because they're bringing the right people along, and that's you mentioned Jeff Roussel and Adam Hamed, bringing Maggie on board from a communication standpoint, and then. In your blog post, you talked about introducing Greg to someone from a leadership standpoint. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, so it's funny. In your episode, Chris, you talked about, you reached out to Jeff Roussel for some networking when you were looking for a new opportunity. And even though that wasn't your intent, it turned into a discussion about a job. And here you are. I had made an introduction between Greg and Alan Wilson. And so the first software company I worked for was called Factory Logic. There was a co-founding CEO who was then, as sometimes happens with the founding CEO, he was exited from that. And then there was temporary, and then they hired Alan Wilson, who provided stability and great leadership. And, the original CEO was a first-time entrepreneur. Alan was very experienced in software companies, large and small. He knew how to grow and scale companies. And he was great for that company. He led that through an acquisition by SAP and was with SAP for a while. And Alan was trying to be retired in Austin. And he's a good guy. And I said, well, would you want to meet Greg? Greg's a first-time entrepreneur. I think you two would get along. Like, why don't you meet up for coffee? And so I think they did. They probably had I don't know if it was a 3-hour conversation, but it's not that he's that much of a talker or something, but I think they found maybe their first conversation wasn't that long, but they had a good connection, and Alan was mentoring Greg. And then I think Alan took on sort of a more formal advisory role with the company. And then through that, there was a decision made, and this was Greg really thinking long term and showing a lot of humility. Alan stepped in to be CEO. Now, unlike that other software company, Greg didn't leave the company. Greg became chief product officer. And the intent was, I think, Alan would be CEO for about 18 months and then maybe try to retire again. But so, Alan was running the company and mentoring Greg. and setting a really good example for Greg. And I know if we did a podcast with Greg about this or got Alan and Greg on together, I know Greg would show his, would share his appreciation for Alan. And I think it says a lot about Greg. A lot of people wouldn't be able to swallow that kind of situation. Their pride or their ego would get in the way. They'd say, I'm the founder. I'm the only one who can run the place. But I think good leaders know when there's an opportunity to learn from somebody else. And because it was positioned as temporary, and that worked out really well. And those were some of the key, couple of years when Alan was involved of building the team a little bit more, kind of carving out, okay, we have a marketing function with Maggie. We've got sales with Jeff and then a couple of people, building out, a customer experience function and team. That was really a pivotal spot. Those are maybe kind of the middle 3 years roughly of the 10 years that I've been involved with KaiNexus. And during part of that time, it's funny, with my role, I became, because now the company was in a position, I was a W-2 employee at 50% for a period. And then as the team was growing and circumstances being what they were, I stepped back to say, you know what, there's a need to hire people with certain experiences who can do the job full time and want to do the job full time. So I stepped back to try to, play a role as a contractor. I had an opportunity. My wife and I had a chance to make an investment in the company, and we did. And like I tell people, even though I'm not a full-time employee, it's nothing less than a full-time belief in the product and the team and the company. And, so I try to help out where I can, because, I'm fortunate. I'm in a situation where I still want to do other things. And I think that's sort of win-win for me to not be a full-time employee.
As one of the newer employees to one of the older employees, and in time of service at KaiNexus, not in chronological age.
Longest tenured.
Thank you, because I think, when we had a conversation up front, we talked before I joined KaiNexus. Greg had encouraged me just to have a conversation with you about culture and to get a feel for why you had been here a while. But I think it would be interesting with the listeners to kind of understand why you've been at KaiNexus for 10 years, what keeps you here and what keeps you going.
That's a great question. I'm trying to think if I really spelled that out in the blog post. So why am I still here? Why am I still involved? So there's a couple of things. There's the people. Greg, as I talked about already, Greg and Matt as the co-founders are incredible people. Jeff Roussel, at this point, almost feels like a co-founder. He's been around for maybe 7 years. So there's the people. There's the incredible team that continues to grow. They continue to impress me. I try to help educate and mentor when I can when it comes to lean and continuous improvement practices that our customers are practicing. So there's the people, there's the purpose. Like I still feel like we are very much scratching the surface with the potential for spreading continuous improvement, which is our mission and our rallying cry. We started off, again, as a startup company that had a handful of healthcare customers, and now we have customers around the world in such a wide variety of industries. Can I tell a quick story, though, a quick detour?
Oh, absolutely.
To that? And then I'll come back to your other question. So this was maybe about 2 years in, and we were very focused. All of our marketing message, the website, everything was focused on healthcare, that we are a healthcare software company. And, that's important. Like startup theory and practice will tell you, pick one vertical, go deep, and then eventually you can, earn the right to go work in other markets. There's something to be said for having very specific focused marketing message. Well, we got an email, or it was a message through the website. Somebody was upset, if not indignant, of why would we not sell software like this to somebody in other industries? And I forget who it was, and I'm not going to name names. I don't think they ever became a customer, but that was, I think, a tipping point to where we realized, okay, we could make the marketing message and positioning more generalized. The product evolved away from being hard-coded about patient safety and being more configurable to different labels and types of safety. So anyway, you jogged my memory about that. But back to scratching the surface. I think we have such an opportunity to continue making an impact. Where we publish on the website. Greg Jacobson sends an email out every month. It says, so far in 10 years, customer self-reported financial benefit alone, in terms of cost savings and revenue growth that's been logged in KaiNexus, is about $5 billion. And that's not to mention the impact on quality and safety and lead times and customer satisfaction and employee engagement. So the opportunity for us to meet that mission and to grow the company is enormous. And I think that's a really interesting challenge. And say, how do we keep a good culture as the company continues to grow? And so it's people and its purpose, and the product has evolved to help meet that purpose. I'm still incredibly excited about the future and everything that KaiNexus has looking forward. So that's why I stay. They haven't they also haven't kicked me out.
I don't think they will by any stretch of the imagination, but I think one of the things that attracted me along with the lines of what you're saying is the company doesn't just create a platform or piece of technology that allows people to share and to participate in spreading continuous improvement. What amazed me the most is once I joined the company to see those same principles that they advocate outside of the company taking place inside of the company, and like practicing sharing, spreading continuous improvement. Mm-hmm. And I think I told you this, or I may have told Greg, like after I'd been here for a week, it says, once you operate in an environment where you have the ability to have a say in making things better, you don't ever want to work in an environment where you don't have a say in making things better. And it's incredible to me. I think that's one of the things that's most attractive to me about the company, the product, and its culture.
Well, and I was on a call the other day with Greg, and Greg said very clearly, we are a mission-driven company. We're not a nonprofit. We're not a what's the there's in some states you have the type of business classification. Is it B Corp, or it's something where like you have a certified public good to your mission. And when I think of the public good of continuous improvement, it's not just the financial benefits to our customers and the other business improvements that they are testing and implementing. It's the impact on employees' lives. To your point, Chris, being in an environment where you're engaged and your voice is heard and you're making a difference, like that makes a big impact on people's general well-being. And there are arguably connections to health. Like when people work in an awful, toxic, stressful workplace, there are really bad effects on physical health. So there's that mission. And, just one maybe last example, case in point, earlier this year, when organizations, including some of our customers, were very rapidly trying to ramp up mass vaccination clinic efforts. And Helen Zach, who people might know from her days at the Lean Enterprise Institute and Catalysis, well, we're now colleagues through a consulting firm called Value Capture. She's there full time. I work as a contractor through them as well. Back to, they're one of my many hats. And Helen brought up the idea of, wouldn't it be great if there was a platform and a way for people in these organizations to share their rapid learning about mass vaccination? And I said, I think I might know a company. And Helen has talked to the people at KaiNexus many times, Greg and Jeff. And so I brought that to the team. And Maggie Millard, who we've already mentioned, our director of marketing, got more excited about this idea and basically stood up a custom version of KaiNexus that we invited people to come sign up for a free account if they were doing work on vaccination improvement. And Maggie said, a couple of weeks into this, as we were ramping it up, we were hearing the voice of these customers around what types of things they wanted to share and to set up a platform that was going to be super easy for them to use. Maggie at one point said, that this is the most fun she's ever had working on anything in her career. And, I think that's something KaiNexus was doing to try to provide some public service and to use our platform in a kind of unique and novel way. And, we had people from, I think, 12 countries and 40 US states logged in and participating. And a lot of that has declined as the need for mass vaccination clinics has come and gone. But I think that's going to go down in our company history as one of our initiatives that demonstrates that mission very clearly. And I'm really proud that the company is able and willing to do that. And the support for doing things like that come from Greg and the leadership team. I couldn't have been prouder.
Well, Mark, I think just to put a capstone on that for you, one of the things that I take seriously as I've joined the company is continuing the work that you've done in helping preserve the lean values of the company and the lean knowledge, and making sure that we're true to our mission, we're true to our roots, and we're also true to continuous improvement. So congratulations on your KaiNexiversary. And I hope when my 10 rolls around, we get to celebrate your 20 at the same time. So Thank you.
Yeah, look forward to that. Thanks a lot, Chris.
Well, as we wrap up, is there anything that you want to share with folks about any upcoming webinars or anything that you think is important that folks should know?
Well, if people want to learn about upcoming webinars, July and August and beyond, they can go to KaiNexus.com/webinars. We don't have registration open for any of them currently, but there's a link you can click on. You can receive email updates whenever we announce new webinars. There's the webinar library that people can click on. Those webinars are all on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. So I would encourage people to go there, KaiNexus.com/webinars. We'll put links in the show notes if people want to read a little bit about what we had done with KaiNexus. I'll put a link to the customer results page, and I'll put a link to the blog post that I wrote about the first 10 years.
Mark, thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for hosting, Chris. Well, thanks for listening. To learn more about KaiNexus, the company, our software, and our team, you can go to www.KaiNexus.com. That's KaiNexus.com.